Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is the author of the novel Playing Hard, set in the rock music scene and the first novel in the Perfection Saga Series. Her name is Beth Pellino-Dudzic, and my interview with Beth will follow the teleportation sound. Beth Pellino-Dudzic, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
What are some fond memories you have of the real-life 1970s and 1980s rock band scene, and were you a member of a rock band yourself?
No, but I wanted to be, and I think that I always felt I wasn't good enough, and this is actually how I felt. I wasn't good enough, although I probably could have, and I didn't feel attractive enough. And I did find out, because I am friends with some of those people, that they were like, oh my God, you didn't realize how hot you were. So now I have regrets about not doing that. But it was a fun era to be able to live through. I don't think that there was or has been, except for maybe the grunge stuff in Seattle. The New York club scene back then was very vibrant. So many different types of bands. There were the progressives, there were the glitter rock, there were, country, not country, but more, how do I say it?
Southern rock is...
Southern rock, definitely. And I was able to become friends with, I would say they were the number one band on the club scene at that time. And they played more of a progressive type of music. And that was... having those people as your friends was like a gateway of knowing everybody. And I eventually did meet who became my boyfriend, who was in another band. Different. They were more of, let's see. They played T-Rex and, Aerosmith, that kind of vibe that was going on. And it was a lot of fun. And there is one band that came out of that club scene. And I guess I can name them. But Twisted Sister came out of that club scene. And on the weekends in certain clubs, especially out in Long Island, they would have two bands play, 4th of July weekend, Memorial Day weekend. And yes, my boyfriend's band at the time, it was their band and Twisted Sister. And it was like you could not move in the club. It was so packed. And it was just... you went and either followed a specific band or you were someone who went to a certain club and whatever bands played, they played. But it was really a following. Bands had different followings and there was crossover, obviously, but it was great. It was a lot of fun. But you also see the gritty side of it. At the end of the night, you're in a club and there's beer and vomit and all types of things. And you leave at like 2:00 in the morning and go to a diner, and you don't go home till 4 a.m. and you sleep all day. And that's the way it was. And I believe it's probably still the way bands do it today. It's your clock is flipped. So that was interesting. And I was also going to school at the time. So it was like living on 3 hours of sleep. But I wouldn't have traded for anything.
You were born in the Bronx, lived most of your life in Westchester County, New York, lived part of your life in Hawaii, and now call Pike Road, Alabama home. What was
Correct.
the biggest culture shock you experienced when you moved to Alabama after living in New York and Hawaii?
I would say Alabama was not so much of a culture shock. Alabama gets a bad rap, but I will say it is a very nice place to live, and I have a group of very close friends here, and Alabama has a lot to offer, and I think it just gets a bad rap. It is where the civil rights movement started, so there's that. And I live. Pike Road is a bedroom community of Montgomery, which is the capital. I would say, though, the biggest culture shock was moving from New York to Hawaii. That was a culture shock. That was also me. I my daughters were born there. I had a very, let's say, privileged life there, but the whole time I lived there, and there's a culture in Hawaii, and you learn how to say those names because the Hawaiian alphabet's only 16 letters, so you better know how to pronounce the street names, otherwise you're in trouble. And there's a lot of Hawaiian culture that's interjected in schools, and I went along with it, but I was still, that's where I was really wanting to go back to New York. I made it my home, raised my daughters there for a little while, and said, I cannot do this. I'm living in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and I'm 5 hours away from the mainland of the U.S. That's the biggest. That was a bigger culture shock than moving to Alabama, to be honest.
What now? I'm going to ask you some questions about your writing work without spoiling too much of your first novel, which is titled "Playing Hard." What is it about?
Okay, well, it's about two very affluent cousins. They're cousins, and they grew up in a very Italian household, and their fathers are wealthy from construction, but they also, as an Italian American, they also have another side to them, which I did grow up in an Italian household, and we never mentioned certain things. It's just something that that your father or whomever is part of, and it's just something that innately and you never talk about it. And these cousins grew up where their fathers are very big in that part of Italian culture that we don't speak of. And their fathers kind of plan their life for them. And one of the cousins, the male cousin, is very accomplished in piano and music and guitar. And he starts a band, and she wants in. So they start a band, and this was true in the New York club scene. There was one person who booked all the talent in a lot of the clubs. New York City clubs were a little different when we're talking about like the CBGBs, My Father's Place. Those clubs had a different vibe. But if you wanted to play in Long Island, Westchester, the Bronx, Connecticut, New Jersey, there was one person. And so you had to, what's the word I'm looking for? You had to play for him, and then he would book you in what he felt was the right club. And the bigger following you got, the bigger clubs you got. So that's kind of how they start off. And, they're probably like a B minus band, and they go to a place, and which was the biggest. And this is where the truth kind of comes in. There are tidbits in the book that are things that really happened. they go to Glen Island Casino, which is where back in the 40s it was very big, the big band era. But on Tuesday nights in the summer, back in the 70s and 80s, that was the place to be because there were three bands that played. And so they go there, and the female lead doesn't really, yes, guys want her, but she doesn't want them. And she sees this lead guitarist, singer of another band, and they both fall in love immediately. So it's that journey of the two of them and her cousin, and the things that they have to go through to get a record deal. And back in that day, you had to play and you had to have original music. That was the other thing. And then an A&R guy from a record company would, scour the clubs to see who was worthy of a record contract. So that's part of the book of them getting to that place. And there's, I don't want to ruin it. There are some they play in two different bands until they don't. And that's all I'll say. And then it's the journey of the band Perfection and what happens to them once they do get that record deal, and the scene that they have to endure, the touring, and they're an opening act. And there are things that happen when you tour, and they're touring with the most popular band in the country. So they get to see that other side, which is drugs, groupies, everything you imagine that you would see on a tour. And that's where the book becomes. And it's also a love story of those two characters, and the very strong connection between the two cousins. And the book progresses from there.
Playing Hard is the first book in a planned series titled Perfection Saga. Without spoiling too much of the rest of the series, how many books will be in the rest of the series? And in general, what will the rest of the series be about?
Okay, well, I will tell you that book 2 is, I am working on the dedications and all of that for book 2, because book 2 is going to be ready to be published probably by the end of August, beginning of September. And book 3 and book 4 are already written. So when I write, I don't stop. And, I have a collective of people I work with, and they always say to me, Beth, that's 2 books now. And I'm like, okay. So book number 5, which I believe will be the last book, but my editor was the one who said, I think there's a book 3. And as I said, book 3 turned into book 3 and 4, and book 5 is the one I'm about to write. I have it all laid out in my head. So I can tell you the name of the next book is called Playing High. So the second book goes into what happens when you do make it, and all of the pitfalls and people who try to upset the duo, the main characters, the love story of those 2 people, and things that get in the way, and them trying to have a semi-normal life. And they realize that they really can't, because you want to be famous, you want to be popular, and then when you do, it changes your life. You can't live your life the way you used to live it, and it's them going through that. And also, I do over the 4 books, and I will say that it goes over a 20-year period. We're taking them from the beginning, moving them to being popular, and the changes that happen in the music scene, because the record companies kind of owned you. You signed a deal and they say, okay, we want 4 or 5 albums out of you. And it's, write music, record, go on tour. And it is that kind of thing. And then all of a sudden things started happening like MTV. And we were sold on a video, and which a video could sell you in a matter of a few weeks. So I go into the changes of the music scene that start to happen. And it's no longer, well, maybe we don't need to tour. Maybe we just need to produce 4 videos for MTV. And so the next one, I can't give the name, but it focuses on the male and female lead and sort of a journey that they have to go on. And then book 4, I reintroduce the Italian background that they come from and how things get to the point where they need their father's help. So it kind of gets a little dirty. And so that's up to book 4. Book 5, I don't have a name yet. It will be playing something. I just don't know what that's going to be yet. It goes through a 20-year period of a band, a love story. And then the other characters, the other members of the band do have their own story, their own love stories, their own personal journeys. And as the books grow, so does those storylines. But they're all intertwined in the band, if that helps you.
I'm going to ask the next couple of questions I have as a combined question, try to move this interview on a little bit more quickly. Okay. How much of the character Gina in Playing Hard was based on you, and what singers, if any, did you base the character Trevor on?
Okay, well, I will say Gina is me, and I am Gina. I make no bones about that. The way she talks, her attitudes is me. Okay. When I'm writing her lines, I actually say them out loud because I want to make sure it's authentic, that an Italian girl, I'm not from Long Island, I'm from Westchester, but it's basically the same thing when you grow up in an Italian family. So I usually say that out loud. Now, as far as Trevor, I will not say any. Now, it could be so many guys from that era. I will not say anybody who I base Trevor because it's fiction. And I want the reader to picture Trevor as they see him. There are a lot of guys that fit that description back in the day or now. So I'm leaving Trevor as I want the reader to have that picture of who they think it is or who they picture in their mind. So, yes, Gina's me. Trevor is for the reader to picture in their own mind.
Is your book Playing Hard self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published? And will the rest of the Perfection Saga series be published in the same manner?
I am self-publishing, which is different, and it is, I will say, costly. However, I will put this caveat in there. There are a lot of bad eggs in the self-publishing industry. And I did research, and there is a website called the Alliance of Self-Publishers, and they list a lot of people, a lot of companies. And honestly, there was only 7 of them who had a green light, which meant that they were good. And I interviewed everyone, and the person who I landed with is phenomenal. And we put together a team, like it's sort of like subcontracting out She had people who I interviewed for editor and for book design and marketing. And I'm lucky that three of those people have worked together on several projects. So I believe I have the A team of people. And as I told you, as I'm talking to you, I am getting all my dedication and acknowledgments ready for book two, because book two is getting ready to launch. And I've been lucky. There are so many bad self-publishing companies. Now, the thing that I love about self-publishing is that I own everything. The people that I'm working with, they supply the product. I mean, the writing is me, but as far as book designs and graphics and this, I own everything. So will the Perfection Saga be self-published? Absolutely. I would not want to give my rights away to anybody. And that's one thing that I was told, a publishing company, if this takes off, could come to you and want to publish your books. And I will say no, because I don't want to give up the rights of my books. I worked hard for them, and I love the fact that I own them.
One last question. If Playing Hard was adapted into a feature film, who would you like to see play Gina and Trevor?
Okay, so I get this question a lot. And in my mind, and I've done other podcasts where they said, I don't think it would be a movie because the story is very laid out. It would be more of a Netflix, Apple limited series, which would probably be 2 seasons because the story is quite involved. So, when you ask who would play Gina, in my mind, there's only one person who could play her authentically. And I think you kind of know the answer to that. And I want to see if you get what I'm telling you. There's only one person who could play Gina.
Oh boy, it'd either be you or Cyndi Lauper.
No, it would be me. I love Cyndi Lauper, though. I took my daughters to see her. I love Cyndi Lauper. No, it would be me. I've been practicing my singing. My singing voice is coming back. So yeah, with and when I tell my daughters that, they say, "Are you crazy?" But with AI and CG and all of that, I don't think I look that old, but they could make my face look younger in the younger parts of the story. And I think I could definitely pass for the rest of the story. So yes, it would be me. I did want to act. So this is like, it's all coming to a head now. The creativeness that I have kind of, or other people or me not believing in myself, I now believe I can do all of those things. And it's just funny how at this point in my life, it's just flowing out of me. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
I asked about who would you like to see play Trevor as well?
Trevor. Oh gosh. It would have to be a musician. I think that and there are a couple of people who I've thought of. Don't want to name them because if it is actually made into a series, I don't want to jinx it. But I think that the band Perfection, the characters, which is Trevor, Gina's cousin Rio, and then there's Jeff and Ian. They would have to be played by musicians. So not the rest of the characters. I mean, I thought of who would play Gina's mother, but again, I don't want to jinx it because I believe this could be made into a limited series. And if I start naming people, then I kind of ruin it. So I kind of want to keep that under wraps. But I will say anybody who is Trevor, Rio, Ian, Jeff, they would have to be musicians because I have written songs and would love those songs to be made into songs, out there in the world. So I would have to work with musicians. And, you know, musicians act every night. You don't think they do, but they do. They have to go out on stage, and when you're touring, some nights maybe you don't feel it, but you got to go out there and sell it. You have to sell your performance. So that's why I say I have some musicians in mind for the characters, but I don't want to play my hand because I would like to get those people if it's made into a series. So I don't want to broadcast it. I don't want to jinx myself. I'll let other people think, oh, this person would be great for that role.
Beth, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing guest.
Well, thank you. And I loved your questions. Questions I've gotten before, and I love putting it out there, expanding on all those things. So it was enjoyable, and I appreciate you having me.
That was a fascinating interview, and I wish Beth the best with the rest of the Perfection Saga series. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.